Number 1. The Captain. In my youth, I did a lot of things that I am not very proud of today, but I wanted to see other parts of the world, and I knew that I did not have the discipline to be in the Navy. So I got jobs on various ships, working from one place to the next. I liked being out on the ocean quite a bit, but I also really liked visiting different places. However, when I was in Japan, I lost my job on one of the ships. I didn't have much money at the time, and nowhere to stay really in Japan. While I was stranded in Osaka, I was able to get a job on a ship. I wasn't really happy about it though. I mean, the ship was sort of seedy. I don't want to tell you too much about what was going on, but I will let you know that it was a smuggling ship. The conditions on the ship were much different than the other ships I had worked on. The crew were the closest things to pirates that I could have imagined lived in that time period. But the scariest person on the ship was the captain. He was a surly man. He only had one arm. He had a scraggly beard, and it almost seemed like he never changed his clothing. I also like to think that he probably had read Treasure Island one too many times. He was very no-nonsense, barked orders at people, and didn't really seem to care too much for the people who worked for him. I mean, I guess in a way it made sense. The man was already deeply entrenched in a very illegal business, so I guess he was pretty much a god on his own ship. So the most frightening thing that ever happened to me in my life happened while I was working on that ship. It was a situation that made me realize exactly what sort of dangerous situation we were in. And not from the law of any government. From that man. 2 of the crew members had to make a repair on the ship. They were carrying a piece of sheet metal across the deck, and carrying it in a very awkward manner, over their heads, as opposed to by the side. I was about to go over to them and offer some help. Before I had a chance to, though, the guy who was carrying it in the front slipped. He lost his grip on the piece of sheet metal, fell forward onto the deck. The guy in the back then naturally stumbled as well, lost his grip. The piece of sheet metal then slid forward and sliced into the neck of the crew member in front, halfway decapitating him. The second crewman jumped back from the sheet metal, and his nearly decapitated partner. He began screaming as other crewmen came up to the scene. The captain made his way on deck, obviously alerted by the commotion going on the deck. He walked up to the 2 crewmen, looked down at them. The nearly decapitated man was not dead, though. He was convulsing and bleeding all over the place. The captain reached into his jacket and pulled out his revolver. He then shot the almost headless man twice, putting him out of his misery. When this happened, I immediately thought the captain was being merciful. Could I possibly have been wrong about him? But while this thought was going through my head, something happened that brought me back to my original opinion of him. He took the gun, shot and killed the crewman who was carrying the back of the piece of sheet metal. The man fell down dead. The captain made us clean up the bodies and take up the sheet metal to finish the repair. The entire rest of the trip to Hong Kong, I was terrified. I mean, to think that this man was heartless enough to kill someone for making a mistake. I was walking on eggshells the entire time. When we got to the port, I decided I'd rather be stranded and homeless in Hong Kong than to go back to that ship. I didn't feel safe until it left port, though. Number 2. The fog. I like the fog. I always have. But the fog that I like is fog on the land, not on the ocean. There's little more scary and confusing than a thick fog when you're out at sea. I have a boat that I like to take out on the ocean as often as I can. It's a small boat, but it's got a kitchen, small dining family room, and bunks to sleep on. Very often, me and a couple of my friends will go out and spend some time on the ocean. Although I always keep a very close watch on the weather, weather can actually be unpredictable. We had been out for a couple of nights, and I made a really foolish navigation error. I really hadn't realized it at the time, because we were having some beer, and I was just trying to relax. But one of my buddies noticed something, and pointed it out to me. I turned and looked, and was immediately alarmed. We were moving towards what appeared to be a really thick fog. It was also moving towards us, and very quickly. Now, this is where my complete stupidity kicked in. I had never actually been through a fog on the ocean before. I actually like it when it's foggy on land. There's something about the creepiness of the atmosphere, especially when it's really thick. My friends, being as stupid as I was, thought it would be quite the adventure to stare into the fog and see what it was like. I'd like to think that if we were all sober, that perhaps we wouldn't have considered doing something so foolish. As we approached the major block of fog, we began seeing smaller wafts of fog rising off the ocean. It was really very eerie. The fog got thicker and thicker as we got more into the fog bank. Soon, we couldn't really see anything that well. We turned out all of our lights, except of course for the starboard and port navigation lights, which don't turn off. It was drunken stupidity, but it was pretty cool too. It did get a little less cool, however, when we got lost in the fog. I mean, I had my GPS, so I wouldn't be lost on the ocean. But that didn't tell me how big the fog was, and what we had to do in order to get out of it. As more time passed, even though we were clearly still quite intoxicated, the coolness of our expedition gave way to some nervousness. We tried turning some lights back on at one point, but if you know anything about fog, that doesn't always help too much. After a while, we saw something in the fog. It was hard to make out, but it definitely was something there. I immediately thought that another boat was out there, so I decided I should go and ring my foghorn. I went and did this several times to warn the other ship I was there, in case it didn't see me there. I waited to see if I could get a response, but I didn't. So I blew the horn again, in case they didn't hear us. After trying this for a few more times, and not getting any sound at all in response, we thought about the possibility of the ship being adrift. We really thought about taking a closer look, but we're not drunk enough that we didn't consider the dangers of getting too close to an adrift boat. So we did our best to keep our distance, but tried to get close enough that we could hopefully see something. And then, when we were passing the boat, one of my drunk buddies decided he wanted to try something stupid. He went into the cabin and came back with a golf ball. We had played golf before our trip. I knew what he was going to do immediately and tried to stop him. However, it didn't work, as he took the golf ball and hurled it at the other boat. We all heard the clanging noise as the ball hit the hull. And then, lights came on the boat. After moments, 3 men came onto the deck, all holding guns, and they aimed right at us. We needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. A few shots rang out, though, before I was able to get to the controls and pick up speed. I thought we were going to get away, since my boat was obviously much newer and a faster model than they had, but I really doubted they would come after us. But I was wrong. They tried to come after us. All I could figure to do at that point was try to use the fog to our advantage. I turned the lights back out. It was dangerous navigating like that before, but even more dangerous now that I was going much faster. But I had to do what I had to do, because I was convinced those 3 men wanted to kill us. After an hour, I was positive that we lost them. However, I was too terrified to turn the lights back on right away. When I eventually did, I was very scared until we were able to get out of the fog. Sometimes, something that might seem adventurous is just plain dumb. Number 3. Ghost Ship. This was really the creepiest thing I had ever had happen to me in my life. I come from a really long line of ocean fishermen, and of course, with overfishing, it gets harder and harder all the time to really make a great living off of this. Yearly, it seems like I have to go further and further out into the ocean in order to get anything I can actually sell. It's definitely difficult having a smaller boat and competing with large commercial boats. But I really love the life, and am not really willing to change my livelihood, just because it gets more difficult. Anyway, so I did have this really bizarre experience once when I was out fishing. We had been out for a couple days and not doing the best job. We went out further and further. On the third night, we had gone out pretty far on the ocean. We hadn't seen any other boats or ships in quite a while, which I hoped was a good thing. Maybe we'd be lucky and we were able to farm an area that wasn't getting too much attention from other ships. As night fell, the ocean was really, really calm. I was getting ready to get a little sleep when one of my shipmates came into the cabin and told me that there was a ship out ahead of us. It was coming right in our direction. Now, I wasn't exactly sure why he felt a need to tell me about this. Being out on a boat in the ocean isn't like being in a movie. We weren't really in any danger of being hit by the ship. We'd just move out of the way. But he insisted that I had to see the ship. I went up on deck, and when I did, I understood immediately why he wanted me to come out on deck. The ship was a cruise ship, but it wasn't like any cruise ship that would still be in service. The ship looked like it had to be 60 or 70 years out of date. And there were no lights either. If we hadn't had a full moon, we would have a much more difficult time seeing it in the first place. I was curious. We tried to contact them on radio, but we didn't get any response. We weren't in direct line of the ship, but I definitely wanted to see the ship as it passed by, so we got as close as we could get safely to the ship. When it got closer, I noticed it was obviously adrift, so we had to be extra careful. And when the ship was pretty close to us, it was quite overwhelming. It was so large, but it was ominous and dark and dead. There were no lights on, and this was obviously a ghost ship. And keeping in mind that I am not referring to an actual ghost ship, I mean that the ship was abandoned, and who knew how long it could have been adrift. If you've never been in a boat next to a huge ship, it would be hard for you to imagine what it was like. It was ominous and completely and utterly dwarfed our boat. If we got too close to it, it would easily destroy us. We were like mice at the feet of a giant. "Holy shit," one of my crew members said to me. I looked over at him, and he pointed at the ship's deck. I was shocked to see someone on deck. A very young man. Looked like he was in his early 20s. He was leaning over the rail looking at us. As we went along, he simply looked at us as we floated past. I tried calling out to the guy, but got no response. He just stood there, looking down at us. We turned around to get another look at him when we passed by, but he wasn't there the second time. We eventually went on after seeing this amazing spectacle, but it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. We reported this all to the Coast Guard, but I honestly think they thought it was a prank. I can't blame them. I would have thought it was a prank too. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you want to read print versions of these stories, you can do that at the Killer Orange Cat subreddit. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider subscribing by using the button below, or using the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to submit it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.